Why the hell did I ever trust them? I muttered under my breath, slamming the pen down onto the table. My name is Melody Reynolds, Senior Compliance Officer, former loyal employee of Grantwell Manufacturing, and the woman who saw too much and paid the price. What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of how I tore apart a corporate empire, and how they tried to bury me for it. Trust me, you won't see the truth coming. I had never imagined my 29 years at Grantwell Manufacturing would end this way. As I sat in David Langston's office, the clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with every passing second, mocking the stillness in the room. The window, once my occasional escape, now felt too small, as if I couldn't breathe in this space that had become so familiar, yet so foreign. The walls, lined with plaques and certificates, were silent witnesses to my 3 decades of dedication, loyalty, and sacrifice. 29 years, is it? David's voice broke through my thoughts, casual, almost too casual for the situation at hand. Quite the accomplishment, he added, leaning back in his chair. I had been here almost as long as he had been alive, but I didn't respond. What could I say? I had never been one for small talk. 29 years and 362 days, I replied, feeling the weight of the years in my voice. For a brief moment, my stomach twisted, and I felt a pang of nostalgia for the woman I used to be, the one who believed in the system, in the values that Grantwell once represented. I looked at the manila folder on his desk. It was innocuous in appearance, but I knew that it held my future in it. The next few minutes would define the final chapter of my career, and yet I couldn't help but feel an unsettling calm wash over me. I had always prided myself on my professionalism, on my ability to stay composed in moments of high stress. But now, with my pension just 3 days away from vesting, it was clear that the calm I felt was not of relief, it was of recognition. The sound of David's voice seemed to echo in the air. Due to budget constraints, we're letting you go. Effective immediately, he said, his eyes never meeting mine. The words landed like a heavy blow, and yet they didn't surprise me. The timing was too perfect. My pension was about to vest, and here I was, being discarded like an old piece of furniture. I blinked, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just about losing my job, it was personal. My entire adult life had been dedicated to this company. My time, my family, even my health had been sacrificed in the name of compliance. But now, as I sat in front of David, with that folder in front of me, I could see the betrayal so clearly. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought I would just sign the papers and leave quietly. 3 months' salary, David continued, his voice indifferent, almost rehearsed. Sign by tomorrow or you get nothing. His words echoed in my head as I tried to process what was happening. I was being forced into a corner, pressured to accept an insultingly low offer, with the unspoken threat that any resistance would result in total loss. The package didn't include my pension, didn't include healthcare continuation, didn't acknowledge nearly 3 decades of service. It was a legal trap, designed to silence me, to make me disappear. I should have been angry. I should have felt outrage, or even despair, but instead I felt something I couldn't quite place, a strange, unnerving calm that bordered on acceptance. Thank you for the opportunity, I heard myself saying, my voice steady as I picked up the folder from his desk. My hands were trembling slightly, but I kept them hidden beneath the table. I stood up, smoothing my skirt as I walked out of his office. There was no need for protests or pleas. I had seen this coming, and I knew exactly what I had to do. But I would not beg for what was rightfully mine. As I stepped out of the office, I caught the briefest glance of Janet from HR, standing awkwardly by the door. Her face was a mask of sympathy, her eyes filled with nervous hesitation. She had always been kind to me, but now I could see the discomfort in her gaze as she handed me my things. A few scattered papers, a photo of my late husband, and a small potted plant my daughter had given me years ago. It was all I needed to take. The rest, my years, my sacrifice, couldn't fit into a cardboard box. "I'm so sorry, Melody," Janet whispered, her voice barely audible, and I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The hollow pit in my stomach deepened, but I couldn't allow myself to feel too much. "Not yet." "Thank you," I said again, barely a whisper as I left the building. The automatic doors slid open and I stepped outside into the cool April air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot, and for a brief moment I felt the weight of the world. But that was fleeting. As the door to my car closed behind me, the calmness that had taken root inside me remained. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the wheel, my eyes focused on the familiar streets of St. Paul, but my mind was elsewhere. On the manipulation, the lies, and the painful truth I couldn't ignore. I had been robbed, not just of my job but of something far more precious, my integrity, my trust in the system, and the company that had been my life for nearly 3 decades. How could they do this to me? The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the wheel, my eyes focused on the familiar streets of St. Paul, but my mind was elsewhere. On the manipulation, the lies, and the painful truth I couldn't ignore. I had been robbed, not just of my job but of something far more precious, my integrity, my trust in the system, and the company that had been my life for nearly 3 decades. How could they do this to me? The question echoed endlessly in my mind, like a broken record, but I knew the answer. It was cold, calculated, and all too common. Grantwell had no place for people like me anymore. People who valued truth, who valued hard work, who questioned when things weren't right. People who didn't just follow the rules but upheld them, even when it was uncomfortable. I turned onto my street, the rain now tapping softly against the windshield, almost as if it were mourning the end of an era. The houses, the trees, the cathedral where Thomas and I had once vowed to love each other forever. They were all silent witnesses to the woman I had become. The woman I never imagined I would be. The woman who had given up everything for a company that had discarded her without a second thought. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, the engine of my car still running, as I let the weight of it all sink in. The emptiness in my chest grew, not just from losing my job, but from the realization that my sacrifices meant nothing to the very people I had spent my life serving. My pension, which I had worked so hard to secure, was now slipping through my fingers, and there was no one left to fight for it but me. I turned off the engine, but I didn't move right away. Instead, I sat there, staring at the rain-soaked world outside, wondering where to go from here. There had to be something I could do. I couldn't let them get away with this. I had earned that pension. I had earned every bit of it. Stepping out of the car, I grabbed the manila folder from the passenger seat, the very same one that had sealed my fate. The severance package was tucked inside, untouched, unopened. I had no desire to see the terms again, but I knew I had to. They were counting on me to sign it quickly before I had the chance to think it through, before I could consult anyone. They wanted me to be desperate, to sign away my rights out of fear of what would happen next. But I wasn't desperate. Not yet. Not until I had seen the evidence. Not until I knew exactly what I was up against. I walked inside, leaving the folder on the kitchen table as I made myself tea. The small ritual helped calm my nerves, but it didn't last long. The silence in the house, the stillness of everything around me was suffocating. I opened the folder with shaking hands, knowing full well that what I was about to read was not just an insult. It was an attempt to erase me. 3 months' salary, that was all they offered for nearly 3 decades of my life. No pension, no health benefits, no acknowledgement of the work I had done or the years I had given to this company. I took a deep breath, feeling the anger rise within me. It was too easy, too convenient, too planned. As I set the papers aside, I realized the true scope of what had happened. This wasn't just a wrongful termination. This was deliberate. The timing of it, the severance package, everything about it screamed that they had planned this. They had calculated it. They had moved quickly, like sharks circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now that moment had come. I took a long sip of my tea, the warmth of it doing little to quell the cold rage that was beginning to build inside me. I had seen the patterns before, at work, in the numbers, in the dismissals of my concerns. I had raised alarms about the financial irregularities. I had flagged every discrepancy, every strange transaction. But it had all been ignored. All of it. Now, they were trying to silence me, trying to make me vanish without a trace. But they had underestimated one thing. Me. I walked to my home office, the place where I had spent countless hours reviewing documents, organizing records, and ensuring that everything was in order. It had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could think clearly, where I could focus. I opened the fireproof lockbox that I had kept hidden for years, the box that held my insurance policy. Inside, there were copies of everything. Everything I had reported, everything I had flagged, everything I had kept hidden away, just in case. Loan applications with falsified data, emails instructing staff to backdate quality control certifications, quarterly reports with manipulated figures, over 1,000 pages of evidence that would bring down everything they had worked so hard to hide. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over Gregory Santos's name. I had never called him for years, but now, there was no other choice. I needed help. I needed someone who understood how this system worked, someone who could help me bring this down. My finger pressed the screen, and as the phone rang, I could feel the tension in my chest ease just a little. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, and I wasn't going to let them take it without a fight. "Gregory," I said as soon as he answered, "it's time." I knew the road ahead would be long, and the battle would be harder than I could imagine. But as I spoke to Gregory, I realized one thing. I wasn't alone. And for the first time since the termination, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose that had been missing for days. It wasn't just the usual morning fog of coffee and half-formed thoughts that greeted me when I got out of bed. No, this time, my mind was clear, sharp, and focused. I dressed carefully, as if preparing for a battle, even though I didn't know the full extent of the war I was about to wage. The phone call with Gregory the night before had made things clear. He was right. This wasn't just about wrongful termination. The timing, the manipulation, the sheer audacity of what they had done, it pointed to something far darker. This wasn't just a case of a corporate job gone wrong. It was fraud. Systematic fraud, and it had been going on for far longer than I had suspected. "Don't sign anything," Gregory had cautioned. "Secure those documents and get ready. This is bigger than just you." And that's exactly what I was doing. I wasn't going to sign their severance agreement. I wasn't going to let them erase me without a fight. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, and for what was right. For every person who had ever been wronged by a system that placed profit above integrity, for every report I had filed that had been ignored, for every whistleblower who had been silenced. I spent the entire morning organizing my records. The fireproof lockbox had become my sanctuary, filled with evidence of everything I had reported. Everything I had done to stand firm, even when no one else would. There were loan applications with falsified data, quarterly reports with manipulated figures, emails instructing staff to backdate quality control certifications. I had kept it all, every single document, not because I thought I would need it, but because my instincts had told me that one day, someone would need to know the truth. I carefully went through the stacks, ensuring everything was in order, indexing each document with the precision I had honed over the years. The work was methodical, but it was necessary. As I worked, I could feel the anger inside me building. Anger at Grantwell, at David Langston, at everyone who had dismissed my concerns, at everyone who had chosen to close their eyes to the truth. By noon, I had 3 identical packages ready. One for the SEC, one for my personal records, and one that I could use as leverage if necessary. The drive to the post office was a blur. I kept my focus on the road ahead, ignoring the growing tension in my chest, the fluttering unease that kept reminding me of what was at stake. But I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to let fear take over. Not now. As I drove back, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. It was Janet from HR. Her name had come up several times in the past 24 hours, each voicemail more urgent than the last. "Melody, we need that paperwork signed today. David's getting frantic. If you don't sign it, you could lose everything. This is your last chance." Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. It was a calculated move on their part, a desperate plea for compliance. The more desperate they were, the more it confirmed that I was on the right path. They knew I had something they didn't want exposed. Another voicemail came in shortly after. "David. Melody, we need to settle this today. Just sign the papers and we can all move on." "This is ridiculous." His voice was now clipped, almost condescending. I could hear the stress in his tone, the desperation to end this before it spiraled further out of control. I ignored the call, just as I had the others. Every unanswered call only added to the growing evidence. They were scared, and I wasn't going to let them get away with this. By the time I returned home, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The calm that had washed over me earlier now had a different kind of weight. It wasn't just calm, it was resolve. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. That evening, the doorbell rang. I froze for a moment, my heart thudding in my chest. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. David stood on my doorstep, dressed in his expensive suit, looking out of place in my modest neighborhood. His hands were clenched, and his jaw was set in a tight line. I didn't answer the door. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me in a state of panic or desperation. "Melody, I know you're in there," he called through the door. "This is ridiculous. Just sign the papers, and we can all move on." I didn't respond, watching silently as he placed an envelope in my mailbox. His arrogance was palpable, but I wasn't surprised. They always believed they had the upper hand. Once he left, I retrieved the envelope and opened it. Inside was another copy of the same severance agreement, this time with a handwritten note. "Final opportunity, signed by 9 a.m. Monday." I didn't feel anger this time, just a cold determination. They thought they could intimidate me, pressure me into compliance. They thought they had me cornered, but I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. I sat in my living room, staring at the papers in my hand. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to feel something that had been buried beneath the surface for too long. It was a sense of justice, a reminder that I had done nothing wrong. I had stood by my principles, and now I was going to make them pay for what they had done. As the night fell, I thought about the phone call I had with Elizabeth earlier. She had been worried, but I hadn't told her the full truth. She didn't need to know yet. But as I sat in the quiet of my home, I realized that the hardest part was behind me. I had taken the first step toward holding Grantwell accountable. The battle was far from over, but I was ready. Tomorrow the SEC would know everything, and nothing would ever be the same again. The internal struggle between accepting the injustice and standing firm against it reaches its breaking point. Melody's resolve to confront the wrongdoing builds as she secures her evidence and prepares for the battle ahead. The tension continues to mount as the corrupt forces within Grantwell scramble to silence her. Monday arrived, and with it, a sense of resolve that had crystallized over the weekend. The weekend that had been filled with unanswered calls, frantic messages, and constant reminders that Grantwell had underestimated me. They thought they could wear me down, that I would fold under the pressure of their veiled threats and their attempts at intimidation. But they were wrong. I had been preparing for this moment, mentally and physically, for years. The years of meticulously documenting financial irregularities, the countless times I had raised alarms only to be ignored, the sacrifices I had made, all of it had led to this point. This was not just about a pension. This was about something far bigger. This was about standing up for the truth, for accountability, for integrity, in a world that often seemed to reward the opposite. As I dressed that morning, I chose my navy suit carefully. It wasn't just any suit. It was the one I wore for important meetings. Meetings where I had to stand firm. Meetings where I had to be more than just a compliance officer. I had to be a force for change. Today, I wasn't just Melody Reynolds, the senior compliance officer who had worked for Grantwell for nearly 3 decades. Today, I was a whistleblower, someone who had the courage to take on a corrupt system and expose the rot from within. Before leaving, I made one last check of the 3 packages I had prepared over the weekend. One for the SEC, one for my personal records, and one that would serve as leverage. The leverage package was still sealed, but I had a feeling I wouldn't need it. The SEC already had what they needed. They had the documentation, the emails, the reports, all the proof that would bring down the house of cards that Grantwell had built. I drove to the federal building, each mile feeling like a weight on my chest. The air outside was crisp, the sky a clear blue, but my mind was anything but calm. As I approached the building, I could feel the tension building. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of a confrontation that would change everything. I walked through the entrance, the lobby's cold marble floors echoing beneath my heels. The glass partitions separated the various offices, creating an atmosphere of quiet authority, but I was ready for it. I had already faced David Langston's cold, calculated cruelty. I had faced the betrayal of the company I had dedicated my life to. Now, I was going to face the system that allowed it to happen, and I wasn't going to back down. Gregory was waiting for me in the lobby, his familiar face a comforting sight. He had always respected my work even when others had brushed it aside, and now he was here, standing beside me as I took the next step. "Melody," he greeted me warmly, his handshake firm. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, but I'm glad you're here." "Thank you, Gregory," I replied, forcing a smile. "Let's get this over with." He led me to a conference room where two other investigators were waiting, Angela Brennan, a senior enforcement attorney, and James Weston, a forensic accountant. Both were professional and courteous, but I could tell they were already aware of the gravity of the situation. The room was sterile, almost clinical in its presentation, and as I sat across from them, I felt the weight of what I was about to do settle over me. "Miss Reynolds," Angela began, her voice calm yet deliberate. "Before we begin, I want to confirm that you understand the process we're initiating today. Once you share this information with us, it becomes part of an official investigation. There's no turning back." I nodded, meeting her gaze. "I understand completely." For the next 3 hours, I walked them through everything. I outlined the financial discrepancies I had discovered over the years, the false reports, the backdated certifications, the revenue manipulation that had escalated under David Langston's direction. I didn't hold back. I spoke plainly, clearly, and with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized my career. James examined the financial documents with growing concern. As he reviewed the reports, I could see the disbelief in his eyes. The discrepancies weren't small. They were systemic. "This isn't just misreporting," he said slowly. "This is fraud. The company has been systematically overstating revenues by at least 18% for the past 2 years. My heart sank, but it wasn't because I was surprised. I had suspected as much for a long time. But hearing it confirmed, hearing someone else acknowledge the scale of the manipulation, made it all the more real. The rot within Grantwell ran deeper than I had imagined. "And you reported these issues internally?" Angela asked, her tone sharp. "Multiple times," I confirmed. "Each time I was told they were being addressed, but nothing ever changed. Instead, my concerns were buried and the higher-ups just moved on, as if I didn't exist." Gregory leaned forward. "And you believe your termination was directly related to these reports?" "Without question," I said, my voice steady. "The timing couldn't be clearer. 3 days before my pension vested, that wasn't a coincidence. I was a liability, and David Langston needed me gone before I could escalate this further." The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. This was no longer just about corporate mismanagement or a disgruntled employee. This was a systemic failure, a calculated effort to silence someone who had dared to expose the truth. "We're going to move forward with this," Angela said finally, her voice resolute. "We'll need your formal statement, and we'll begin the investigation immediately. Given the documentation you've provided, this is going to move quickly." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief wash over me. The hardest part was over. I had taken the first step. As I left the SEC offices that day, the sky outside seemed a little less daunting. I knew the battle wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Grantwell had done everything they could to silence me, but they had underestimated the one thing that had kept me going for all these years, my unwavering commitment to the truth. And now the truth was finally coming to light. With the SEC investigation officially underway, Melody is poised to bring the truth to the surface, and the path ahead will be fraught with challenges. The forces within Grantwell are already on high alert, but Melody's resolve remains unshaken. The battle for justice is only just beginning. The following days passed in a blur. The SEC's investigation was officially underway, and yet, the storm it had unleashed within Grantwell had barely begun. I spent my nights working with Gregory and his team, organizing additional documentation, securing more evidence, and preparing myself for the fallout that was sure to come. The phone calls, the emails, the quiet threats, Everything had escalated, and I had never felt more alone. But there was no turning back now. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to back down. The calls from Grantwell's legal team came relentlessly, each message more urgent than the last. "We need your signature, Melody," they insisted. "You need to sign the severance agreement. This is your last chance." It was all designed to wear me down, to make me doubt myself, to force me into submission. But the more they pushed, the more determined I became to hold my ground. They had underestimated my resolve. This wasn't just about money or a job anymore. This was about exposing the lies, the corruption, and the exploitation that had festered within the company for years. I had no idea how deep it went, how many people were complicit in the scheme that had been orchestrated under David Langston's direction. But I was starting to understand the full scope of it. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that this wasn't just about one bad actor. This was about a culture that had allowed fraud to thrive, a culture that had ignored the warning signs and allowed people like me, people who had dedicated their lives to the company, to be discarded when they no longer served a purpose. One afternoon, as I sat in my kitchen going over the latest batch of documents, I received another call. This time it was from Janet. Her voice was tight, strained. "Melody," she said, her words clipped. "The board is meeting today. They're looking for you." I felt a chill run down my spine. They were closing in, the pressure was mounting. But I had expected this. The meeting with the SEC had already set things in motion. It was only a matter of time before Grantwell realized they couldn't bury the truth anymore. "Tell them I'm not coming," I said firmly, my voice steady. "Tell them I have nothing to say to them until they address the real issue, the truth, the fraud, everything I've been trying to expose for years." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Janet spoke again, softer this time. "I understand, Melody, but they're going to try to discredit you. They'll say anything to make this go away." "I know," I replied. "Let them. I've been preparing for this moment for years. I'm not afraid of them anymore." I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the conversation settle in my chest. This wasn't going to be easy, it wasn't going to be quick. But I had made my choice, and I would follow through with it, no matter the cost. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Grantwell's legal department, the same one that had tried to force me into silence with the severance agreement. This time, the letter was different. There was no demand for my signature. Instead, it was a formal acknowledgement that they had received the SEC's request for information. They had officially opened an internal investigation into the allegations I had raised. The letter was a thinly veiled attempt to placate me, to show that they were taking the situation seriously. But I knew better. The company was only doing this because they had no other choice. The SEC was breathing down their necks and they couldn't ignore it any longer. Still, it was a small victory. For the first time, I felt like I was being heard. The next day, I received a call from Gregory. He sounded almost relieved as he spoke. "The SEC's investigation is moving quickly, Melody. We've already uncovered evidence of irregularities dating back several years. Your documentation was exactly what we needed to open this up." I allowed myself a small breath of relief. But I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was only the beginning, and the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. There would be more pressure, more threats, and more attempts to discredit me. But I couldn't let that stop me now. "Keep going," I told him. "I'm with you every step of the way." As the days passed, the SEC continued its investigation, and the heat on Grantwell intensified. I could feel the pressure from all sides. My phone never stopped ringing. The media had caught wind of the scandal, and I was no longer just Melody Reynolds, the quiet compliance officer. I was the whistleblower. The woman who had exposed the rot within one of the largest manufacturing companies in the country. The calls came from reporters, from former colleagues, from friends who were worried about me. Some of them supported me. Some of them wanted to know if I was okay. But there were others, those who had once been close to me, who called to question my motives. "You really think this is the right move?" one of them asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You're going to bring down the whole company just for this?" I didn't answer right away. There was nothing I could say to change his mind. He had never understood. But I did understand something now that I hadn't before. This wasn't just about revenge or personal gain. This was about doing the right thing, no matter how difficult it was. I'm doing what I should have done years ago, I replied finally. I'm doing what I should have done when I first saw the signs, when I first reported the fraud. It's time for this company to face the truth. And it's time for me to get my life back. The voice on the other end of the line was silent for a long moment before he muttered something that could have been an apology, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't interested in his apologies anymore. I had bigger things to worry about. As the evening wore on, I sat at my kitchen table, the documents in front of me once again. I had made my choice. The investigation was progressing. There was still so much to do, but at least now I felt like I had a chance to make things right. And as the night fell silent around me, I thought about everything I had given up over the years. The missed moments, the sacrifices, the family events I had skipped in the name of compliance. But in this moment, I knew one thing. I had finally found my voice, and nothing was going to stop me from using it. In this part, Melody's resolve to expose the truth becomes stronger. She faces internal and external pressures as the investigation moves forward, but her commitment to justice only deepens. The decision to become a whistleblower marks a pivotal moment in her journey, as she realizes that standing up for what's right is the only choice she has left. As the days unfolded, I felt the tension in the air grow thicker with each passing hour. The quiet hum of my daily routine had turned into the suffocating stillness of an impending storm. Every news report, every phone call, every visit from the postman brought with it the sharp edge of uncertainty. I had known this moment would come. The moment when the full weight of what I had set in motion would come crashing down on Grantwell. But the reality of it was more unnerving than I had imagined. I kept a low profile in the days following the SEC's initiation of their investigation. There was no need to make myself a target for more media attention. I could feel the whispers, the growing sense of panic that was beginning to sweep through the ranks at Grantwell. The company's leadership, once so confident in their ability to control everything, now found themselves caught in a vice they could not escape. The press was abuzz with speculation about the unfolding scandal, and the company's stock, which had been riding high only weeks before, began its inevitable decline. By the time I woke up on Friday morning, the storm had already broken. Headlines splashed across the business pages. SEC investigates Grantwell Manufacturing for alleged securities fraud. The news was everywhere. Everyone knew now. Grantwell was facing one of the most serious corporate crises in recent history. And it was all because of me. I hadn't expected relief, but the wave of disbelief that hit me when I saw the news felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. For years I had been ignored, dismissed, and even vilified for questioning the company's practices. Now the truth was out, and there was no going back. Later that day, as I sat quietly in my living room, a call came in. It was from Gregory. His voice was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction in it. "Melody," he said. "Things are moving fast. We've just confirmed that the SEC is expanding its investigation. They're going after multiple board members now, not just David. This is bigger than we thought." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the weight of his words. I had suspected the rot went deeper, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. The corruption that had seeped into the very foundations of Grantwell was now under the full spotlight of federal investigation. And it was only a matter of time before the entire company crumbled under the pressure. "How soon do you think it'll all come to light?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. "Sooner than we expected," he replied. "They're going after the top now. Your documents were the key to unlocking everything. The timing with David, his termination, and everything that happened afterward was the tipping point. The board's involvement, it's undeniable now." I didn't respond immediately. The significance of his words hung in the air, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself a moment to process it all. There had been moments in the past where I had questioned whether I was doing the right thing, where I had doubted whether exposing the truth was worth the personal cost. But now, with the weight of the investigation growing heavier, I knew I had made the right choice. But as the investigation gained momentum, the board members of Grantwell began scrambling to protect themselves. They had dismissed my concerns for years, and now they were trying to rewrite history, attempting to distance themselves from the very actions they had condoned. One evening I received a call from Janet, her voice trembling on the other end of the line. "Melody," she said almost apologetically, "you were right. They're going to try to discredit you. The board is planning to make an official statement, saying that they never knew about the fraud, that it was all David's doing. They'll say you didn't raise the alarm in time, that you didn't flag things properly. They're gonna blame you." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This was the moment I had known was coming. The moment when they would try to rewrite the narrative. The moment when they would attempt to shift the blame onto me, the whistleblower who had dared to expose them. But it wouldn't work. It couldn't work. I had the evidence. The facts. The truth. "Let them," I replied, my voice firm. "Let them try. The truth is undeniable. I've been documenting everything for years, Janet. They can't cover it up anymore." She was quiet for a moment, and then I heard the faintest sigh of relief on the other end of the line. "I knew you'd say that. I'm sorry, Melody. I really am. This isn't how it was supposed to happen." "I know," I said softly. "But it's happening now, and I'm not backing down." The following days saw a flurry of activity. Reports from the SEC continued to surface, and the media coverage intensified. I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet, the world I had known for nearly 3 decades now crumbling. I had been a part of this company for so long, had dedicated my life to its success. But now I was the one leading the charge to take it down. The sense of irony wasn't lost on me. But with the crisis came an unexpected turn of events. I received a letter from William Hargrove, the chairman of the board. It was formal and, as expected, filled with empty words of regret. But there was one sentence that caught my eye, a sentence that made my heart beat a little faster. "We would like to discuss your return to Grantwell under new leadership. We believe your expertise is crucial to helping us navigate this transition. Please contact us as soon as possible to discuss." I stared at the letter for what felt like hours. The offer was a thinly veiled attempt to keep me from going public, to placate me in the midst of the crisis. But I had no interest in returning to a company that had betrayed me, a company that had allowed this corruption to fester unchecked. I picked up the phone and called Barbara, my attorney. "It's a trap," I said bluntly. "They want me to come back and help them clean up their mess, but I'm not doing that. Not after everything they've done." Barbara's voice was calm, but I could hear the approval in it. "Stick to your guns, Melody. You've come this far. Don't let them manipulate you now." And so, I made my choice. Grantwell could burn for all I cared. I had nothing more to give them. The battle for truth and accountability had already begun, and there was no turning back now. In this part, Melody's actions continue to unravel the company's fraudulent practices. As the investigation intensifies, the board members scramble to save themselves, but Melody stands firm, knowing that the truth cannot be denied. The corporate crisis reaches its peak as the company attempts to make a last-ditch effort to bring her back into the fold, but Melody rejects the offer, resolute in her path forward. The fight for justice is far from over, and Melody is more determined than ever to see it through. It felt like the world was moving in fast forward, while I was stuck in the same place. The days blurred together as the crisis at Grantwell reached its peak. The media continued to pore over every new development, the SEC's investigation grew more intense, and every day brought new reports of the company's stock plummeting, of executives scrambling to protect themselves, of desperate attempts to salvage what remained of the company's reputation. But none of it mattered to me anymore. I wasn't interested in the spectacle or the fallout. I was focused on one thing: making sure the truth came to light, no matter what it cost. The first real sign that my efforts were paying off came when I received a call from Gregory. His voice was filled with a quiet satisfaction that I hadn't heard in days. "Melody, it's happening," he said. "The SEC has confirmed that they're moving forward with enforcement action. They're already issuing subpoenas to key individuals. The board members are scrambling. They know they're on the hook now." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "It's about time," I replied, my voice steady. but the weight of it all was beginning to settle in. What's the next step? They're bringing in external auditors, forensic accountants, everything. The full investigation will move forward, and it's clear that this isn't just going to be a slap on the wrist. They're facing real consequences now. The fraud has been too widespread, they've built a house of cards and it's collapsing. For the first time in what felt like ages, I allowed myself a moment of relief. It wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The company that had betrayed me, that had discarded me like an afterthought, was now facing the very same reckoning I had warned them about for years. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. It was from Patricia Donovan, the interim CEO. Her voice was different this time, soft, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how to approach the conversation. "Melody," she began, "I know this is complicated, but I need to tell you something important. The board has decided to rescind your termination. They've also agreed to reinstate your pension, all of it, in full, including your benefits." I was quiet for a moment, processing what she had said. "So, they're giving me my pension now, after everything?" "Yes," Patricia said, her voice still cautious, "and we're offering you additional compensation for the difficulties you've faced. The company is undergoing a significant restructuring, and we'd like to invite you to be a part of it. We value your expertise in compliance, and we need people like you to help rebuild Grantwell from the ground up." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. The offer felt empty, like a last-ditch attempt to appease me, to make me go away. After everything that had happened, after all the damage, after they had tried to bury me, they were now offering me a seat at the table as if I had somehow forgotten their betrayal. "I don't think so," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in helping Grantwell rebuild. You can't erase what's been done, and frankly, I'm done. This offer is too little too late." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Patricia spoke again, her voice softer. "I understand, but the offer still stands, if you change your mind." I hung up the phone without another word. There was no point in pretending. They didn't deserve me. They didn't deserve the effort it would take to rebuild what they had destroyed. As the weeks went by, the SEC continued its investigation, and Grantwell's leadership continued to unravel. By the end of the month, several members of the board had resigned in disgrace, including William Hargrove. David Langston was terminated for cause, his once gilded reputation now tarnished beyond repair. The company had been shaken to its core, and there was no denying that it would never be the same. And yet there was something deeply satisfying about it. The systems of corruption, the manipulations, the lies, all of it had been exposed. Grantwell had tried to bury me, to push me aside, but in the end I had forced them to face the consequences of their actions. The following month I received another letter. This one came from the SEC, and it was unlike any other letter I had ever received. The agency had completed its preliminary investigation and was moving forward with formal charges against multiple executives, including David Langston and several board members. The company would be forced to pay millions in fines, and the implicated individuals would face legal consequences. I read through the letter carefully, the weight of its contents sinking in. This was it. The final validation. The truth had won. But there was more. The letter also contained a section about whistleblower protections, including a substantial monetary award for my role in exposing the fraud. The SEC had awarded me 15% of the penalties assessed against Grantwell, a figure that made my head spin. It was more than I could have ever imagined. The money would provide financial security for the rest of my life. But more than that, it was a recognition of everything I had fought for. Everything I had sacrificed. I spent the next few days in a daze, absorbing the shock of it all. The victory felt surreal. I had been right all along, but that didn't make it any easier to process. There were moments when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm me, but I refused to let it. I had come this far. There was no going back. One afternoon, as I sat by the lake at my new home, watching the sunset over the water, I received a call from Elizabeth. "Mom," she said, her voice warm and full of concern, "I'm so proud of you. You did it. You showed them all what you're made of." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride and love for her. "We did it, sweetheart, you and I. We've both been through so much." She was quiet for a moment before speaking again. Do you regret staying at Grantwell all those years? Given how it ended? I thought about it for a moment. No, I said, finally. I regret that it was necessary to expose them. But I don't regret my work there. Integrity isn't just about being honest when it's easy. It's about maintaining your principles even when it costs you something. She paused, then replied softly. You taught me that, you know. Not with words, but by example. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly, smiling to myself. Maybe that was the most important thing, knowing that in the end, I had done the right thing. I had shown my daughter what it meant to stand firm in your values, no matter the cost. And that was the real victory. In this part, Melody sees the full impact of her actions, as Grantwell faces severe consequences for its fraud. Despite the company's attempts to bring her back, she remains resolute in her decision to move on. The truth has won, and Melody's role as a whistleblower is fully vindicated, both legally and financially. The victory is not just personal, it's a testament to the power of integrity in the face of overwhelming odds. As I sat by the lake, the setting sun casting a golden hue over the water, I realized that everything had changed. The years of sacrifice, the battles fought in silence, the moments of doubt, and the quiet strength I had summoned in the face of overwhelming odds, all of it had brought me to this point. I had done what I had set out to do. I had exposed the corruption, I had fought for the truth, and I had held my ground. And now I was free. But it wasn't just about the freedom I had gained from the battle, it was about what I had learned along the way. I had thought that the end of this story would bring me peace, that the satisfaction of justice would be enough to silence the anger and the frustration I had carried for so many years. But now, as I looked out at the lake, I realized that the true reward wasn't in the money or the recognition, although both had their place. The real reward was in the strength I had discovered in myself, the resilience I never knew I had, and the understanding that integrity wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. I had always prided myself on being meticulous, on paying attention to the details, on being the one to stand up when something wasn't right. It was the very essence of who I was, even when the world seemed to reward silence and compliance. But in this journey, I had learned that integrity was more than just doing the right thing when no one was looking. It was about standing firm when everything around you urged you to back down. It was about facing the truth, even when it meant losing everything you thought was secure. As the months went by, I focused on rebuilding my life. My daughter Elizabeth had moved back to St. Paul, bringing my 2 grandchildren with her. It felt good to have them close, to spend weekends together, making up for the time I had lost while I was consumed by work. The lake house, which had once felt like an unfamiliar place, now felt like home. The sound of laughter, the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen, the sight of my grandchildren running around the yard, it was a new chapter in my life, one I hadn't imagined a year ago. I used my newfound financial security to establish a scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in corporate ethics and compliance, something that had been dear to my heart long before the scandal. I wanted to ensure that the next generation of women wouldn't have to choose between their values and their careers. I wanted to make sure they had a path forward, one that didn't require them to compromise who they were in order to succeed. The scholarship fund was my way of ensuring that my legacy wasn't just about the fight I had won, but about the future I hoped to build. It was about creating a space for the women who would come after me, who would face their own challenges in a corporate world that often valued profit over integrity. And, of course, I thought about Thomas, my late husband, who had always been my rock, my support, the one who had taught me the value of hard work and integrity, even when it was hard. If he had been here to see it, I knew he would have been proud of me. Not for the money, not for the recognition, but for the person I had become through the ordeal. Elizabeth and I often talked about the past, about the years I had spent at Grantwell, about the toll it had taken on me, on us. There were moments when I wished things had turned out differently, when I could have been the mother I wanted to be, the wife I had been before. But those regrets didn't define me anymore. They couldn't. What defined me now was the choice I had made, to stand firm in my beliefs, even when it meant sacrificing my career, even when it meant risking everything I had worked for. The truth mattered more than anything. And now, I knew that the integrity I had spent my life protecting was the most valuable thing I had. One evening, as Elizabeth and I sat on the porch watching the sunset over the water, she asked me a question that I had been waiting for. "Mom," she said softly, "do you ever regret it? Do you regret taking on Grantwell? It changed everything." I looked at her, the reflection of the setting sun dancing in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought about all the moments I had missed. The years spent fighting a battle I never asked for, the times I had put my work above everything else. But then I thought about the people I had helped, the truth I had uncovered, and the future I had secured for myself and my family. "No," I said finally, my voice calm, unwavering. "I don't regret it. I regret the way it had to happen, but I don't regret doing the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, and it's not always the most comfortable path. But it's always worth it." Elizabeth smiled, and for the first time in a long time I saw the pride in her eyes, the same pride I had always tried to instill in her. In that moment, I knew that the choices I had made had not only shaped my life, but had also shaped hers. As the days turned into weeks and then months, I continued to watch as Grantwell tried to rebuild itself from the ashes of the scandal. The new leadership was doing what they could to salvage the company's reputation, implementing stricter compliance measures and more transparent reporting practices. But I wasn't watching from the sidelines anymore. I had walked away, and now I was free. I had spent so many years chasing success, chasing security, and in the end, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Success wasn't about titles or money or power. It was about living a life that was true to who you were, standing up for what was right, even when no one was looking, and never compromising your values no matter the cost. I had lived my life in pursuit of truth, and now, with everything behind me, I could finally say with certainty, I had won. In this final part, Melody reflects on the profound changes in her life after the victory over Grantwell. She understands that the true reward isn't in the money or the recognition, but in the integrity she maintained throughout the battle. Her actions have created a lasting legacy, inspiring the next generation to follow in her footsteps and uphold the same values she did. This marks the end of a personal transformation, where Melody not only restores justice but also secures her place as an example of strength and moral conviction.